Emily was awakened by the incessant ringing of her phone. Groggily, she reached for her phone and answered it.
Is this Emily? You need to come to the North City Police Station and bring a clean set of clothes for your husband. He's here at the station.
The call ended abruptly, leaving Emily puzzled.
Husband? Were they talking about Robert? We haven't registered our marriage.
Despite her doubts, she followed the officer's instructions, bought a set of men's clothes, and headed to the police station. Upon arriving, she briefly explained the situation to the police.
Robert is your husband, right?
No, we haven't gotten married yet.
He and a woman named Jessica were engaging in inappropriate activities in a car. The car's handbrake wasn't engaged, and it rolled into the river.
Are they okay?
They're fine. Did you bring the clothes?
Emily glanced at the clothes in her hand, chuckled, and then threw them into a nearby trash can.
Robert's situation has nothing to do with me. You should contact his family. We haven't registered our marriage or held a wedding. Given the current circumstances, it's even less likely that we will.
As Emily was leaving, she saw the police helping Robert and Jessica inside. Robert's expression changed when he saw Emily.
It's not what you think. Jessica and I were discussing the wedding plans in the car, and the handbrake wasn't engaged, so.
Robert, do you think I'm a child? Who would believe such nonsense? Jessica, how does it feel to use someone else's man? Is it better than your own?
Jessica's face turned pale, and she immediately burst into tears, hiding in Robert's arms.
Robert, I can't face anyone anymore.
Robert hugged her protectively and sneered at Emily.
Emily, do you even know what kind of woman you are? All those men chasing you in North City, aren't they just after your body? You wanted to get married because you said your grandma.
Before he could finish, Emily slapped him.
Scoundrel!
She walked away without looking back. As Emily left, a black stretch limousine pulled up at the police station entrance. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out of the car.
Uncle Alexander.
North City, Royal Hotel. When Emily arrived at the hotel, it was already past 10. As soon as she entered, Grandma Helen came up to her.
Emily, what's going on with you? Never mind, hurry up and change into your wedding dress. Today is my granddaughter's wedding day.
The proud smile on Grandma Helen's face made it impossible for Emily to tell her that the wedding was off. The Shang family had once been one of the top families in North City. 3 years ago, they suddenly went bankrupt. Emily's parents passed away, and her grandfather had a stroke. Emily, who was studying abroad, was urgently called back by her grandmother. For 3 years, Grandma Helen had been holding the family together. A week ago, Emily agreed to Robert's proposal because the doctor had told her that Grandma Helen had late-stage lung cancer and didn't have much time left. Now, seeing her grandmother's hopeful eyes, Emily couldn't bring herself to say anything.
Where's the groom? I haven't met him yet. You didn't come together? It's your wedding day, and you still won't let me meet my future grandson-in-law.
Emily's expression froze, and just as she was about to speak, Grandma Helen pulled her inside.
First, change into your dress. There's no time to waste. Call Robert and tell him not to miss the auspicious time.
After pushing Emily into the dressing room, a man entered from the door. Seeing Grandma Helen, he approached.
Hello, are you Emily's grandmother? I'm the groom's.
Before he could finish, Grandma Helen interrupted excitedly.
You must be Robert. We'll talk later.
She grabbed his hand and said urgently,
Robert, it's getting late. Go change into your wedding clothes.
Without giving him a chance to speak, she pushed him into another dressing room. Emily was helped into her wedding dress. When she was ready, Grandma Helen pushed her out.
Emily, your groom should be ready too. I'll go check.
Groom?
He's changing clothes.
Emily's eyes widened. Robert came? Does he have the nerve to show up after what happened?
Grandma, did you see him? Did he say anything to you?
My Emily has good taste. He's so handsome, just like your grandfather when he was young.
At that moment, the door of the adjacent dressing room opened. A tall man in a suit stepped out. A stranger. Emily's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't Robert. She looked up and met a pair of deep, dark eyes. The man in the suit was handsome and elegant, with a cold and stern demeanor. His presence was commanding. Emily was stunned. She knew this face too well. He wasn't her groom, he was Alexander, Robert's uncle. Both from the Fu family, Robert and Alexander were of similar age but different generations. One was outstanding and unattainable, the other a notorious playboy. They were worlds apart.
Emily, isn't his name Robert?
Grandma, my name is Alexander.
Grandma Helen was taken aback, confused. Wasn't his name Robert? She wondered if she had remembered her grandson-in-law's name wrong. Shaking her head, she thought it might be her poor health causing confusion and didn't ask further. She took Emily's hand and placed it on Alexander's arm.
Alexander, my health isn't good, so the wedding is rushed. Today, it's just our family. Don't mind the haste. My Emily is my precious. Take good care of her.
Yes, today we'll have a simple family wedding. When you're better, we'll have a grand wedding. I won't let Emily suffer any grievances.
Grandma Helen's eyes welled up with tears, and she patted his hand.
Good. Good. Let's go.
Emily stood there, bewildered. Her groom had changed from Robert to Alexander? Emily knew Alexander. In North City, there wasn't a woman who didn't know his name. But she had no idea how he had become her groom. It felt like a dream to her. She was led by Alexander to toast with her grandmother. Several times she wanted to ask Alexander what was going on, but her grandmother interrupted each time.
Alexander, what's happening?
I came today to tell your family that the wedding couldn't proceed. Your grandmother pushed me to change clothes.
Emily looked at Alexander in disbelief, staring at his handsome face for a long time.
Are you really Alexander? If you are, how could you let my grandmother manipulate you like this?
Let's take Grandma back to the hospital first, then we'll go home.
Are you really Alexander?
Alexander gave her a brief glance and then walked towards Grandma Helen. After they took Grandma Helen back to the hospital and returned to the car, Emily still felt like she was dreaming. The night before the wedding, her fiancé and her best friend had an accident, and on the wedding day, her groom turned into the nation's most eligible bachelor, Alexander.
Where are we going now?
Home.
Alexander took Emily directly to the Fu family's old mansion. Since taking over the Fu family 3 years ago, Alexander had been living there. The Fu family was large, and Alexander's grandfather had been a commander in his youth. It was said that many of the current leaders in North City had once been his subordinates. Alexander was his late-born son, a renowned genius in North City. He left the Fu family at 12, started his own company abroad at 16, and by 18, he was among the top 50 on the wealth list. 3 years ago, his grandfather's critical illness had brought him back.
Alexander, what do you mean by this? What is our relationship?
Do you want Grandma to leave with regrets?
No.
Then come inside. I have something to do now. We'll talk when I get back.
Alexander left Emily with those words before driving away.
What is all this? Is this to make up for Robert's betrayal?
Behind her, a soft voice asked.
Who are you? Why did you get out of Alexander's car?
Emily turned to see a cute, chubby little boy standing behind her. He wore a white shirt and suspenders, his round face looking sternly at her.
If I told you I was Alexander's new wife, would you believe me?
The boy, who resembled Alexander, especially in his round eyes, looked up at her. When he saw her face, he was stunned. He stared at her for a long time before excitedly shouting,
"Mommy?"
Emily was taken aback by the sudden call. Was everyone in the Fu family this casual? Alexander married her on a whim, and now this child was calling her mommy?
Who are you? Why are you calling me mommy?
"I'm Alexander's son."
Emily was completely stunned. Alexander had a child?
How old are you? I never heard that Alexander had such a big son.
Emily examined the boy who clung to her leg. He did resemble Alexander.
"Aren't you Alexander's wife? Why don't you know he has a child?"
Just then, an elderly voice came from inside the house.
"Jonathan, who are you talking to?" "Butler James, come see if this woman is my mom."
An elderly man in his 50s came out of the house.
"Young master, what nonsense are you talking about? Madam, you've returned?"
Narrator, tone, confused Grandma Helen was taken aback, confused. Wasn't his name Robert? She wondered if she had remembered her grandson-in-law's name wrong. Shaking her head, she thought it might be her poor health causing confusion and didn't ask further. She took Emily's hand and placed it on Alexander's arm.
Grandma Helen, tone, loving Alexander, my health isn't good, so the wedding is rushed. Today, it's just our family. Don't mind the haste. My Emily is my precious. Take good care of her.
Alexander, tone, soft yes. Today we'll have a simple family wedding. When you're better, we'll have a grand wedding. I won't let Emily suffer any grievances.
Narrator, tone, sad Grandma Helen's eyes welled up with tears, and she patted his hand.
Grandma Helen, tone, relieved good. Good. Let's go.
Narrator, tone, bewildered Emily stood there, bewildered. Her groom had changed from Robert to Alexander?
Let go.
Robert, already fearful of Alexander, felt a chill run down his spine at his icy gaze and instinctively released his grip. Alexander pulled Emily behind him, took out a handkerchief from his pocket, and gently wiped her wrist where Robert had grabbed her.
Does it hurt?
At that moment, Emily's accumulated grievances surged up. Although Alexander hadn't done much, she felt inexplicably moved and comforted, her anxious heart calming down. It seemed like Alexander was someone she could rely on. This sense of security puzzled even Emily herself.
I'm fine.
Robert watched in disbelief, his eyes widening.
Uncle, she's my ex. Is she misleading you? Let me tell you, she's like a public transport anyone can get on. She's just a wore-out shoe, don't be fooled by her face. Uncle, I was supposed to marry her, but she messed around with other men.
Before Robert could finish, Emily slapped him.
You filthy dog, spewing nonsense. You talk rubbish.
Robert, not expecting Emily to hit him in front of Alexander, covered his face and cursed.
You wretch! How dare you hit me? Uncle, look at how vulgar Emily is. Don't be deceived by her.
Alexander remained silent, repeatedly wiping Emily's hand before leading her inside. He tossed the handkerchief into a trash bin at the entrance. Robert's face darkened further, but he followed silently, still fearful of Alexander. Inside, Alexander seated Emily beside him and said to Robert expressionlessly,
Kneel.
Robert froze, wanting to speak, but Alexander's gaze made his legs go weak, and he instinctively knelt before him. Ignoring Robert, Alexander asked Emily.
Have you seen Jonathan?
Emily glanced at the kneeling Robert, her earlier anger turning to fear.
Do you like Jonathan?
Distracted, Emily nodded.
Yes, he's handsome and cute, just like you.
Alexander seemed pleased with her answer, nodding.
He probably likes you too.
They chatted casually, ignoring the kneeling Robert.
Uncle, she.
Growing up, Robert had always feared Alexander, even a glance from him could make him sweat. Now, seeing Alexander's attitude towards Emily, he was incredulous.
Bow to your aunt.
Robert's body stiffened, staring at Alexander in disbelief.
Uncle, what did you say? Who should I bow to?
Kneel and apologize to your aunt until she forgives you.
Robert knelt there, stunned. After a while, he looked at Emily.
Did you marry my uncle?
Emily, initially lacking confidence, felt emboldened with Alexander's support. Remembering Robert's actions with Jessica and his earlier words, she was filled with anger.
Yes, if you hadn't come today, I wouldn't have married Alexander and become your aunt.
Only then did Robert fully believe his uncle had married Emily.
Uncle, Emily isn't worthy of you. How could she marry into the family?
Alexander's icy gaze silenced Robert, making him sweat. His legs weakened further, and he struggled before bowing to Emily.
Don't bow. I don't want someone like you bowing to me, it might shorten my life.
If not for Alexander's presence, Robert would have jumped up to hit Emily.
Apologize to Butler James.
Despite his reluctance, Robert turned to Butler James.
I'm sorry, I was too anxious earlier.
Butler James nodded reluctantly. After Robert apologized, Alexander coldly said,
Tell your father, if he continues to indulge you, and there's another incident like last night, I'll remove both of you from the family registry.
With that, he led Emily upstairs.
Come to the study, I have something to discuss.
Watching Alexander's handsome back, Emily felt a strange sense of satisfaction, like the protagonist of a revenge story. Robert, seeing them go upstairs, asked Butler James,
Did Uncle really marry Emily?
Do you think Alexander would say something he didn't mean?
Just then, Alexander, standing at the top of the stairs, instructed Butler James.
Inform the family. I got married today. Tomorrow, we'll have a family dinner, and I'll introduce Emily to everyone.
Butler James respectfully acknowledged. Robert left the house in disbelief. How could his uncle be interested in a woman like Emily? What should he do now? He couldn't let Emily into the family. In the study, Emily stood in front of Alexander's desk, looking puzzled at the documents laid out.
Take a look and see if there's any issue. If everything is fine, you can sign it. If you have any other requests, the lawyer will be here soon, and you can discuss it with him.
What is this?
A marriage agreement.
Alexander, thank you for helping me in front of my grandma today. You don't have to force yourself into this marriage. I won't take it seriously.
I'm not forcing myself. I've already taken it seriously.
Alexander, is it because I look like your late wife that you chose me?
You are my only wife.
After a moment of silence, he continued.
Tomorrow, I'll have Butler James bring Grandma Helen over. We have a private doctor at home, so you don't need to worry about her health. She can stay here for a few days, and you can spend time with her. She'll be happy. As for the marriage, let's not discuss it further. Check the agreement and see if there's any issue.
Thinking about her family's situation and her grandma's health, Emily didn't say more. She flipped through the marriage agreement.
I don't want anything else. Just make sure you cover my grandma's medical expenses until her last days. I will take care of Jonathan as my own child until our marriage ends. I don't need anything else from the Robert family.
All right. I'll have the lawyer make the changes.
Alexander, no matter your reason for marrying me, thank you.
She knew the Robert family's influence in the city. Given her family's current situation, they couldn't afford her grandma's medical expenses. Even though she knew her grandma wouldn't be with her for much longer, she was willing to do anything to extend their time together. Alexander's appearance not only helped her but also got her out of a difficult situation.
There's no need for thanks between us.
Emily felt a bit dazed looking into Alexander's eyes. It seemed as if his eyes were speaking, as if he had 1,000 words to say to her. At that moment, the study door opened.
Alexander, did you find my mom?
Alexander's expression turned stern as he scolded.
Get out! How many times have I told you to knock before entering?
Jonathan quickly turned around, went out, and knocked on the door.
Come in.
Jonathan then entered. Emily watched this scene, glancing between the child and Alexander. Was he always this strict with the child? Yet, Alexander didn't seem as stern with her. In fact, he seemed gentle enough to make her heart flutter. Jonathan came in and stuck his tongue out at Emily.
She is your mother. Call her Mom.
Jonathan's expression froze. He stared at Emily, lips tightly pressed together, not saying a word.
You don't have to call me Mom right away. He's still young.
Before she could finish, Jonathan suddenly buried his head in her embrace.
Mom, I don't blame you anymore. As long as you don't leave, I won't blame you for not wanting me. And when will you get better? When will you remember me and Alexander?
Emily's heart broke hearing the child's words. No matter how mature he seemed, he was still just a child. She kissed his forehead.
As long as you don't push me away, I won't leave. No mother would abandon her child. If your mom isn't with you, she must have her reasons.
Jonathan looked at Emily, his eyes also red. He shyly murmured.
Alexander, this house is leaking. Fix it. Look, it's making my face all wet.
Emily couldn't help but laugh at his words. Butler James, standing at the study door, also wiped a tear from his eye. A family together. How wonderful! The next day, as Emily came downstairs, Butler James approached her.
Madam, I'll take you to choose a dress. Although today is a family gathering, Mr. Alexander wants to introduce you to the Robert family. We'll also pick up Grandma Helen.
Alexander and I aren't. Do we really need to be introduced to the family?
Before she could finish, Jonathan had already walked over.
Butler James, I'll go too.
Seeing Jonathan, Emily couldn't say more. After breakfast, she followed Butler James to choose a dress. On the way, Jonathan took out a few glass marbles from his pocket and handed them to Emily.
Here, this is my gift to you.
Emily glanced at them, not thinking much, and put them in her pocket, assuming they were just children's toys.
Thank you.
So cheesy.
He turned his face away, embarrassed.
We're here.
Emily held Jonathan's hand as they got out of the car. Inside, she saw a familiar figure arrogantly instructing the sales assistant.
Bring me these dresses to try on.
Emily raised an eyebrow and turned away, pretending not to recognize her. The figure was none other than Jessica, who had fallen into the river with Robert.
Take Madam to choose a dress.
The sales assistant led Emily inside.
Madam, Mr. Alexander's assistant called ahead. This section is reserved for our top VIPs. Please follow me.
Emily, you're here to choose a dress too?
The sales assistant, unaware of their history, smiled and introduced.
Yes, this lady is also attending the Robert family gathering. She is Mr. Alexander's.
Emily, have you no shame? After everything with Robert, you're still clinging to him.
Please bring the dresses.
The sales assistant quickly complied, bringing several dresses for Emily to try on.
I want to try those too.
These are reserved for Mrs. Robert. I'm afraid you can't.
Jessica, hearing Mrs. Robert, slapped the sales assistant before she could finish.
You fool! Who do you think is Mrs. Robert? Look carefully and see who really is.
Jessica, you're not even married to Robert yet, and you're already so arrogant. Who knows if you'll even get in?
I may not be married to Robert yet, but I know you definitely won't get into the Robert family.
She pointed at the dresses again.
Bring them to me. If you're going to suck up, at least do it to the right person.
She then bumped into Emily, knocking her to the ground. The marbles Jonathan had given Emily fell out of her pocket. Jessica heard the marbles hit the ground, glanced at them, and disdainfully stomped on them.
Mom, who is she? How dare she step on my marbles?
Jessica, tone, sneering Emily, I didn't know you had such a grown-up son.
Sales assistant, tone, seeking help. Mr. James, this is Mr. Robert's companion. She insists on trying on the ladies' dresses.
Narrator, tone, serious. Butler James frowned slightly and was about to speak when Emily shook her head at him. Seeing her gesture, Butler James remained silent.
Emily, tone, serious, pick them up. And apologized to the sales assistant.
Jessica, tone, sneering Emily, do you really think you're Mrs. Alexander? Robert told me himself that he was just playing with you. You'll never set foot in the Alexander family.
Emily, tone, mimicking Jessica, as far as I know, whether you can enter the Alexander family depends on my approval.
Narrator, tone, angry. Jessica laughed angrily at Emily's words.
Jessica, tone, shouting, who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to decide? You're just Robert's discarded trash, pretending to be so high and mighty.
Narrator, tone, serious. Before Jessica could finish, Emily slapped her.
Emily, tone, serious, your mouth is as filthy as ever. This slap is on behalf of the sales assistant. Emily, tone, serious, Jonathan, how much are those pearls? Make her pay.
Jonathan, tone, matter-of-fact pay. I'm afraid she can't afford it.
Narrator, tone, serious. Jessica, stunned by Emily's slap, finally reacted to Jonathan's words and rushed at Emily, ready to fight. Butler James stepped in to stop her.
Butler James, tone, serious, I'm the Alexander family's butler. Are you Mr. Robert's companion?
Jessica, tone, softening yes. Robert asked me to come and choose a dress. He'll pick me up soon. I don't know why Emily is here. She's Robert's ex. They've broken up. I'm Robert's current girlfriend, and I'm going to the family dinner.
Jonathan, tone, serious. Butler James, if I remember correctly, this store is exclusively for the Alexander family's ladies. She isn't part of the family. She has no right to be here. Jonathan, tone, matter-of-fact, throw her out.
Jessica, tone, shouting, who is he to dare throw me out? And Emily, don't you know she has nothing to do with the Alexander family anymore? How can you bring her here to choose a dress? I'm Robert's current girlfriend.
Butler James, tone, indifferent. She is our lady, and this child is our young master. This store is specifically for the Alexander family.
Jonathan, tone, impatient now. Throw her out.
Jessica, tone, incredulous. Robert brought me here. He's the future heir of the Alexander family. How dare you throw me out?
Jessica, tone, shouting, look closely, she's not Robert's wife. She's just pretending to be Mrs. Alexander. Do you believe her?
Jonathan, tone, cold. Butler James, tell her. In our family, only my father's wife can be Mrs. Alexander. As for Robert, he's just my father's nephew. Even if he marries, his wife won't have the title of Mrs. Alexander. As long as I'm alive, he won't be the heir.
Narrator, tone, frozen. Jessica's face froze at Jonathan's words. She stared at Emily in disbelief.
Jessica, tone, shouting impossible. Emily was just abandoned yesterday. How could she be involved with Mr. Alexander today? Who are you to say such things? And this child, who is he to speak to me like this?
Jonathan, tone, matter of fact, didn't you hear me? Throw her out. Jonathan, tone, remembering wait. Jonathan, tone, matter of fact, are you going to pay for the pearls yourself, or will Robert pay?
Narrator, tone, shouting Jessica, being dragged by the sales assistant, screamed in anger.
Jessica, tone, shouting, do you know who I am? Isn't Robert in charge of the Alexander family? How dare you push me? When I become Mrs. Alexander, I won't forgive you.
Narrator, tone, serious at that moment, a familiar voice came from the door.
Robert, tone, concerned sweetheart, what's wrong? Who dares to bully my sweetheart?
Narrator, tone, serious hearing Robert's voice, Jessica's face was immediately covered in tears.
Jessica, tone, pleading Robert, your butler humiliated me. He said Emily is Mrs. Alexander. And this child wants to throw me out. They treated me like this, you must stand up for me. I've never been so wronged.
Narrator, tone, serious Robert entered and saw butler James, Jonathan, and Emily. His expression froze. Narrator, tone, matter of fact, the scene from yesterday at the old house was still fresh in his mind. He hadn't yet come to terms with Emily suddenly becoming his uncle's woman. Narrator, tone, matter of fact, as for Jonathan, he was the family's treasure, cherished by the old master and fiercely protected by Alexander. Compared to him, the old master's attitude towards Robert was indifferent. Narrator, tone, serious seeing Robert's silence, Jessica grew more confident.
Jessica, tone, shouting Robert, who is this child? The butler called him young master. I never heard you had a brother. I'm supposed to go to the family dinner with you. How can there be such an unreasonable butler? They even mistook Emily for Mrs. Alexander.
Jonathan, tone, slow second brother, I called my dad earlier. He said from now on, if you want your companions to choose dresses, you have to pay for it yourself. This store is for the Alexander family's ladies. Handle your affairs yourself. Jonathan, tone, matter of fact, do you need to speak to my dad?
Narrator, tone, serious Robert didn't dare take the phone and said to Jessica.
Robert, tone, shouting let's go.
Jessica, tone, protesting Robert, Emily.
Robert, tone, snapping I asked you to try on a couple of dresses, and you managed to offend the butler and argue with my brother. Do you know who he is? He's my uncle's child.
Jessica, tone, pale, it wasn't me. It was Emily.
Jonathan, tone, matter of fact second brother, my dad wants to talk to you.
Narrator, tone, serious without waiting for Robert to respond, Jonathan handed him the phone.
Robert, tone, fearful uncle, you wanted to speak to me?
Narrator, tone, serious whatever was said on the other end made Robert's face turn pale.
Robert, tone, desperate uncle, I'm my father's only child. The only child of the Alexander family. How can you send me to such a place?
Narrator, tone, serious after a few more words, Robert hung up the phone, looking dazed.
Jonathan, tone, matter of fact second brother, the pearls I gave Emily were a gift from Grandpa for my birthday last year. You should recognize them. Now that your companion has damaged them, will you pay, or will she?
Narrator, tone, serious Robert, snapping back to reality, slapped Jessica.
Robert, tone, shouting, do you know what you've done? Those pearls were a gift from Grandpa to Jonathan. Do you know Jonathan is my uncle's child? He's the future heir of the Alexander family. Who gave you the audacity to damage his pearls?
Narrator, tone, serious ignoring Jessica, Robert walked away without looking back. Jessica, holding her face in disbelief, watched him leave. After a moment of shock, she chased after him.
Jessica, tone, desperate Robert.
Narrator, tone, serious Butler James stopped her.
Butler James, tone, serious Miss Jessica. I'll have the compensation bill sent to your residence.
Jessica, tone, trembling, what kind of pearls are these? How much?
Butler James, tone, cold as Mr. Robert's companion. I won't ask you to pay the full amount. These pearls are made of glass jade, purchased at a charity auction by the Queen of Country A for 80 million last year as a gift for our young master. You stepped on them, and they're now damaged. Once glass jade is scratched, it loses all value. I'll have a jewelry appraiser assess the damage, and you'll be responsible for the compensation.
Jessica, tone, ashen, just a few marbles, 80 million?
Butler James, tone, smiling, you can ask Mr. Robert. He was present at the birthday party last year, when the old master personally gave the marbles to our young master.
Jessica, tone, desperate Emily, we're good friends. This child calls you mom. Please, help me. You know my family's situation, I can't afford 80 million.
Narrator, tone, pleading. Jessica reached out to grab Emily's hand, her previous arrogance replaced with a pleading look.
Jessica, tone, pleading Emily, our 3-year friendship shouldn't change because of a man.
Emily, tone, mocking Jessica, we're not close, let alone friends. Don't you have Robert? You're about to marry him. Let him help you pay. He's known for his lavish spending in North City. Ask him to speak for you. I'm just a discarded woman.
Narrator, tone, serious. With that, Emily turned away, holding Jonathan's hand.
Emily, tone, cheerful Jonathan, which dress looks good on mom?
Jonathan, tone, pointing that one.
Emily, tone, cheerful mom will try it on.
Narrator, tone, serious. She didn't spare Jessica another glance. Jessica, still wanting to speak to Emily, was stopped by Butler James.
Butler James, tone, serious, throw her out. Mr. Alexander said not to let non-family members in again.
Sales assistant, tone, serious, yes, sir.
Narrator, tone, serious. Robert, having just gotten into his car, urgently called his father. Alexander had told him to go to Africa to work in the mines. When the call connected, Robert, on the verge of tears, pleaded.
Robert, tone, desperate dad, please talk to Uncle. He wants to send me to Africa to work in the mines. I'm your only son, the only child of the Alexander family. How can I adapt to such a place? Can you bear to see me go?
Narrator, tone, serious. Robert's father, Nathan Alexander, though older than Alexander by over 20 years, didn't dare challenge him. Since Alexander took over the family, he had been in charge, and no one dared oppose him.
Nathan, tone, serious, what did you do to anger your uncle again? Did you steal his car for some woman?
Robert, tone, denying no. It's just that Uncle married a woman I was interested in.
Nathan, tone, shocked, what?
Narrator, tone, brief. Robert briefly explained the situation with Emily and Alexander. Nathan, after a long silence, said.
Nathan, tone, serious, so your ex-girlfriend is now your aunt?
Robert, tone, denying dad, I was just playing with her. She.
Nathan, tone, cold, come home first. We'll discuss your trip to Africa later. Explain everything about your ex-girlfriend to me.
Narrator, tone, hopeful. Robert, hearing his father's words, felt a glimmer of hope. He knew his father well. If he said that, there was likely a solution. Narrator, tone, serious. At that moment, Jessica was being thrown out. Seeing Robert still there, she rushed to his car and knocked on the window. Robert, annoyed, rolled it down.
Robert, tone, dismissive. Jessica, I was only interested in you for a while. Now that Emily is my aunt, you've offended her. Don't expect any more good days. Don't contact me again.
Narrator, tone, serious. With that, he rolled up the window and drove off without looking back. Jessica watched the car disappear, feeling devastated and desperate. This was the closest she had ever been to entering a wealthy family. She was unwilling to give up. Her greatest wish was to marry into a wealthy family. If Emily could do it, why couldn't she? She had taken Robert from Emily and could take Alexander too. Narrator, tone, serious with that thought, she glanced back at the store, snorted, and left proudly. As she left, a Rolls-Royce pulled up, and a tall, handsome figure stepped out.
Store staff, tone. Respectful Mr. Alexander. The lady and young master have just arrived.
Narrator, tone, matter-of-fact. The man nodded and walked inside. Narrator, tone, friendly. Inside the store, Emily had just changed into her dress.
Jonathan, tone, proud butler James, isn't my mom beautiful?
Narrator, tone, serious. Before butler James could respond, Alexander said.
Alexander, tone, serious. This dress is too revealing. Change it.
Narrator, tone, serious. Emily, adjusting the neckline, looked up in surprise at Alexander.
Emily, tone, surprised. I thought it was the sales assistant.
Narrator, tone, serious. The Cheongsam's zipper ran from the waist to the neck. If it was Alexander, he must have seen everything. Embarrassed, Emily kept her head down, not daring to look at him.
Alexander, tone, serious. I'll have someone come in to adjust it.
Narrator, tone, serious. He turned to leave, and his phone slipped from his pocket. He didn't notice. Emily caught it and was about to call out when the lock screen lit up. The screen showed a woman who looked exactly like Emily. Shocked, Emily stared at the phone. Narrator, tone, confused. She wasn't surprised that Alexander's screen showed a woman who looked like her, but how could she unlock his phone? Narrator, tone, serious. Did she and Alexander's beloved woman have the same fingerprint? She hesitated and looked at the phone. The woman in the photo looked exactly like her, even the smile. The photo showed the woman and Alexander together. Alexander, smiling indulgently, held the woman, who was on tiptoe, kissing his cheek. The photo was sweet and warm. Narrator, tone, stunned. However, Emily was stunned because the woman had a red mole behind her ear, just like Emily. She touched her own ear. The mole was in the same spot. But before the wedding, she had never met Alexander. How could they have any connection? Narrator, tone, serious. Was it really just a coincidence?